Picture this: a tiny kingdom, no bigger than Switzerland, locked inside the highest mountains on Earth, squeezed between the world's two most powerful nations, India on one side, China on the other. And in the middle, silence. Ancient silence. The kind that has kept this country hidden from the world for centuries. Now imagine someone says, "We are going to build a $700 million international airport. Right here. Not on flat land, not near a coastline, but inside a narrow valley at 8,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by cliffs, fog, and wind so violent it can throw a plane sideways." People called it impossible. Engineers said it defied logic. Geopolitical analysts called it the boldest move in Bhutan's entire history. But the Kingdom of Bhutan built it anyway. And what happened next changed the fate of a nation forever. If this opening just stopped your scroll, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Because what you're about to see is one of the most extraordinary engineering and geopolitical stories ever told. Bhutan has always been different. While other nations raced toward industrialization, Bhutan measured its success not in GDP, but in gross national happiness. While its neighbors built highways and factories, Bhutan guarded its culture like sacred fire. It banned plastic bags decades before it was fashionable. It became the only carbon-negative country on Earth. Tourism was not a right, it was a privilege. Visitors had to pay a daily fee just to set foot on Bhutanese soil. For generations, the only real airport was Paro. And Paro was already a legend in its own right. A place where only a handful of pilots in the entire world were certified to land, because the approach required threading a commercial aircraft through narrow mountain corridors, banking sharply over monasteries, dropping fast, and touching down on a runway that ended at a river. Paro was not just an airport, it was a test of human courage every single time. But as Bhutan stepped into the 21st century, a quiet urgency began to grow inside the palace walls, inside the government chambers, inside the hearts of a people who had always watched the world from a distance. What happens when the world begins to close in around you? To the south, India, Bhutan's oldest ally and closest trading partner, a country of 1.4 billion people whose economy was roaring, a nation that had invested deeply in Bhutan's development for decades. To the north, China, expanding, building roads up to the Bhutanese border, negotiating land, asserting presence in ways that could not be ignored. Bhutan, for all its peace and happiness, found itself at the center of a silent geopolitical storm. And the government understood something that its people were only beginning to feel. Isolation was no longer protection. Isolation had become a vulnerability. Bhutan needed a second international airport, not just to carry tourists, but to signal to the entire world, we are here, we are sovereign, we are open, and we are not afraid. The chosen location? Gelaphu, a small, flat-ish town in the south of Bhutan, near the Indian border, at a dramatically lower altitude than Paro, a place where a larger airport was actually conceivably possible. But conceivable is not the same as easy.
The engineering challenges that awaited were almost biblical in scale. The soil in Gelaphu was a geologist's nightmare. Soft, waterlogged in the monsoon season, shifting under pressure. Before a single runway could be planned, an entirely new vision had to be drawn up from scratch. Not just an airport, an entire special economic zone, a city built around the airport, a dream called the Gelaphu Mindfulness City. an urban concept unlike anything built in Asia. A place where economics would meet ecology, where investment would meet intention. Engineers from across the globe were called in. Architectural firms submitted proposals that looked more like museum art than blueprints. Hydrological experts mapped the water table. Aviation authorities studied wind patterns. Geotechnical teams drove test bores deep into the earth. And then the cost estimate landed on the king's desk. $700 million. For a country with a GDP of roughly $2.5 billion, that number was breathtaking.
This story is just getting started. If you're still watching, drop a comment that says Bhutan Rising. Let's see who's truly with us until the very end. The debates were fierce. "We cannot afford this," said the voices of caution. "We should be spending this money on hospitals, on schools." "We cannot afford not to build it," replied the voices of vision. "Because without connectivity, without sovereignty of movement, we become a pawn, not a player." And then the king spoke. His Majesty, Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuck, the Dragon King of Bhutan, stood before his people, not with the language of politics, but with the language of destiny. "A nation that cannot move," he said, "cannot survive." The decision was made. The project was greenlit, and Bhutan began to build something the world had never seen before. The construction of Galefyu Airport was not just about concrete and steel. It was about identity. Local labor was prioritized. Bhutanese monks performed rituals to bless the land before the first bulldozer moved. Construction schedules were designed around religious festivals. The architectural vision incorporated traditional Bhutanese zong design, those fortress-like structures with white walls, red bands, and golden roofs that have guarded the kingdom for 1,000 years. But beneath that cultural elegance was raw, brutal engineering. Millions of cubic meters of earth were moved. Drainage systems were engineered to handle monsoon flooding of catastrophic scale. Runway surfaces were designed to meet the most demanding international aviation standards. The entire site had to be elevated, reinforced, and essentially rebuilt from the ground up. Meanwhile, the geopolitical pressure never stopped. China's road construction near the northern border continued. India watched carefully, aware that a stronger Bhutan was both an ally and a counterweight. Foreign investors began circling Galefyu, drawn by the promise of the special economic zone. And at the heart of it all, a small kingdom held its breath. If your heart is pounding right now, that means you understand what is really happening here. This is not just a construction story. This is a nation fighting for its future. Like the video if you feel this. Smash it. Then came the day. The day the first test flight approached Galefyu from the south. Pilots in the cockpit, ground crew on the tarmac, government officials in the tower, and ordinary Bhutanese people standing on the hillsides, watching, praying, waiting. The aircraft descended through clear skies. The runway stretched out below, wide, long, and modern. The wheels touched down. Silence. Then, eruption. Cheers from the tower, tears on the tarmac. Monks blew sacred horns. Children waved the orange and yellow flag of Bhutan. Bhutan had done what the world said was impossible. Not because they were the richest, not because they were the most powerful, but because they refused to let geography become destiny. There is a lesson in Bhutan's airport that goes far beyond engineering. It is a lesson about the courage to build when the world says you cannot. About the wisdom to invest in your future, even when the present is uncertain. About the strength it takes for a small voice to say, "We belong in this world,
and we will build the door to prove it. Bhutan did not build an airport. Bhutan built a declaration. A declaration that happiness without sovereignty is fragile, that peace without power is borrowed time, that even the smallest kingdom, with the highest mountains and the clearest skies, can reach up and touch the future with its own two hands. As the great Bhutanese proverb says, the arrow that is meant to fly must first be pulled back. Bhutan was pulled back for centuries. Now, it flies.
If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about the world's most extraordinary places and the people who shape them. Every like, every share keeps stories like this alive. We'll see you in the next one.